On June 4th, 1945, a huge explosion rocks Bremen as the U.S. police headquarters is blown to smithereens. 5 Americans are killed and 4 injured. As the rescuers pick through the rubble, the search for answers begins. Could it have been a gas leak, an unexploded bomb, or maybe something more sinister? Could it have been the Nazi werewolves? This is episode 135 of War Against Humanity, a series of World War II in real time. I'm Spartacus, Olsson. The Allied concern is that this explosion is a steep escalation of what they fear and Allied press publicizes as a growing threat of Nazi terrorism by groups known as werewolves. But the investigations for this particular explosion will later actually attribute it to a simple gas leak, which begs the question: is the fear of a Nazi post-war terror campaign justified? Well, for sure, the Nazi werewolves are not a paranoid fever dream. They date back to the end of 1943 when senior SS officers began considering the formation of a Nazi partisan force. By the spring of 1944, the head of the SS main office, Gottlob Berger, is taking a real interest, and the project takes off. The SS are inspired both by traditional Prussian irregular forces like the Landsturm and by a 1910 novel Der Werwolf by Hermann Löns. It features a group of peasant guerrillas fighting during the 30 Years' War. This imagined community united by race and living off the land is popular with the Nazis, and so they mint their new partisans, the werewolves. Originally, the SS conceives of the force as operating in territory occupied on the fringes of the Reich to slow down an advancing enemy and eliminate collaborators in anticipation for the turning of the tide. Little thought is given to sustaining a resistance movement after a full occupation of Germany. For his part, Reichsführer SS Heinrich Himmler sees the force as yet another instrument of terror. In September 1944, he appoints Hans Adolf Prutzmann as leader. Prutzmann had served as Supreme SS and police leader in Ukraine and is not only well versed in the German brand of terroristic anti-partisan warfare, but has studied the equally brutal tactics of the Ukrainian insurgent army. Through October and November, the SS begins establishing regional werewolf forces. Across Germany, higher SS and police leaders appoint werewolf commissioners to recruit, train, and deploy guerrillas in the region. Most of the volunteers come from the Hitler Youth, the SA, the League of German Girls, and various other party agencies. Others include members of the Gestapo, Sicherheitsdienst, and Kripo. The problem is that there just aren't enough volunteers, and there's also a lack of specialists like radio operators and scouts. In the end, the recruiters turn to conscription and the duping of volunteers, including from the streams of refugees fleeing the Soviet advance. When these reluctant conscripts and volunteers discover the truth that they are to be sent behind enemy lines in the face of an overwhelming enemy, many abscond or refuse to train. Overall, recruitment doesn't meet the SS ambitious goals, but does manage to amass an estimated 5,000 to 6,000 werewolves. After a werewolf has volunteered or been voluntold, it's off to training. At most, this lasts just 5 weeks. In theory, the recruits are meant to take a course in sabotage, Morse code, reconnaissance, and assassination techniques, as well as the usual drill in athletics. Much of the course material is drawn from captured Soviet partisan training manuals with a formal German handbook entitled Werwolf, Winke für Jagdeinheiten, or Werewolf, Tips for Ranger Units, being drawn up in January 1945. But just like the recruitment process, training is very ad hoc. Recruits are supposed to be trained by Wehrmacht and Waffen-SS officers at various Hitler Youth and Waffen-SS facilities. And yes, some werewolf leaders do get a decent standard of training. But SS Special Operations legend Otto Skorzeny thinks the whole program is a waste of time. The rank and file sometimes have as little as 5 days training. In one case, it is left to one of the Luftwaffe's female flak auxiliaries to train a group of werewolf girls. On paper, units are to be organized as follows. At the lowest level is the group, a cell of about 4 to 6 people. 6 to 10 of these groups is organized into a sector. Above this, 6 to 8 sectors form a section. This is really only a rough guide, though, and actual deployment seems to be far from organized. Weapons for werewolf troopers include the usual small arms of rifles, handguns, submachine guns, along with hand grenades, Panzerfausts, plastic explosives, mines, and incendiaries. But by this late stage of the war, everything is in short supply. Stocks of captured American and British weapons are also handed out. The werewolves are meant to survive independently behind enemy lines. Ammunition caches and stocks of foods are buried or hidden in the woods. Bunkers, caves, disused air raid shelters, and derelict buildings are fitted out as living quarters and command posts equipped with radio communications. Werewolf units start going into action in the closing months of 1944. Some of the first werewolves are deployed in Alsace and Lorraine. A couple of small teams go into occupied Metz and Weissenburg to investigate the possibility of starting a resistance movement there. They take heavy casualties, and the whole thing is a waste of time, because the SS actually don't trust the Alsatians and Lorrainians enough to arm them, so there can't be any movement to speak of in the first place. Werewolf teams are also deployed in January and February 1945 in the Reichswald Forest, the Eifel Mountains, the Saar, the Palatinate, and Baden. The teams allow themselves to be deliberately overrun, and then set to work causing chaos in the enemy's rear. At least that's the plan. The reality is a bit different. Like most other partisan and resistance forces, the werewolves are reliant on the local population. But the Catholic Rhineland has always been one of the least enthusiastic areas for Hitler. Those who were enthusiastic Nazi supporters have retreated eastwards. Even beyond political and religious feelings, it's hard to persuade the remaining inhabitants of somewhere like Cologne to take up arms against the Allied occupation. The RAF and the USAAF have stopped hitting the city, and the Allied forces have been fairly benign in their treatment of ordinary people. The werewolves do have some success in the Palatinate and the Saarland, where the population were stronger Nazi supporters and long-time fears of French domination prevail. A few incidents through April and May are attributed to werewolves. Examples include the car bombing of an American Jeep in Neunkirchen, which injures 2 GIs, while in Bad Kreuznach, Schaeff reports troops sniped at by civilians, and U.S. military intelligence arrests 17 alleged werewolves. But on the whole, it's a bit of a damp squib. Lacking training and faced with an unenthusiastic population, the werewolf teams that aren't quickly overrun by the Allies are left demoralized and isolated. Many give themselves up, often turning in their fellow werewolves to Allied intelligence. Others simply abandon their weapons and drift back into civilian life. On the Eastern Front, werewolves also play a minor part in the Battle of Berlin. The first werewolves in the east go into battle in East Prussia, Pomerania, around Posen, and then in Silesia early in 1945. They achieved little in the face of the Soviet Vistula Order offensive, and most were quickly overrun by the Red Army. During the Soviet advance on Berlin, which begins on April 16th, the werewolves do have some success. As the Red Army drives into the city, guerrilla units again permit themselves to be overrun before emerging from their shelters to harass the Red Army rear. After the war, commander of 8th Guard Army Vasily Chuikov will recall, "They hid in basements and in ruins and allowed the forward units of our advancing forces to pass, and sometimes the rearward units as well, and then opened fire with the object of sowing panic in the rear and slowing down or paralyzing action along the front line." Back on the Western Front, the Western Allies encounter more werewolf activity as they push into central Germany. Nazi support is stronger in regions like Lower Saxony, Hesse, and Württemberg, and the US 9th Army records that anti-Allied feeling is more marked than in the Ruhr and the Rhineland. As the US Army advances, it faces booby traps, decapitation wires, mines, and scattered gun attacks in the areas it occupies. Further south, even in early 1945, the Nazis maintain a good degree of support in Franconia. They're determined that the spiritual home of Nazism will fight to the death. But still, they really fail to prepare. Clinging to the Nazi brand of unrealistic optimism, it's only in April 1945 that the higher SS and police leader appoints a werewolf commissioner there. Thus, instead of being sent behind the front to attack enemy supply lines and to conduct sabotage, the werewolves end up fighting on the front lines alongside pretty much anyone who can fire a weapon. This sort of confusion makes it very difficult to determine who or what should actually count as a werewolf or a werewolf action. At Aschaffenburg, Allied troops find themselves under attack by grenade-throwing children. In Würzburg, werewolves and Volkssturmmen hide in tunnels and then attack advancing U.S. forces in the rear. In Nuremberg, home of the famous Nazi party rallies, the werewolves and Waffen-SS fight alongside men and women of the Gauleiter's last-ditch militia. The Americans find they have to comb through rare areas time after time to root resistors out of spider holes. Further south, the supposed Austrian and Bavarian Alpine Redoubt is meant to be a center of werewolf resistance. But here, the S's are taken by surprise by the speed of the Allied advance and also don't seriously begin working on the planning until much too late. The whole thing is thrown into chaos when some of the werewolf commissioners and higher SS and police leaders start fleeing in early April. So, when it comes to actually making a difference in military terms during the end phase of the official war, it's pretty clear that the werewolf program is a failure. The other aspect of the werewolf is its use as a terroristic force. Unable to slow down the enemy, the werewolf spends much of its time following Himmler's order to eliminate anyone seeking to surrender. By March 1945, zealous members of the werewolves are painting graffiti declaring, "Beware traitor, the werewolf watches," or "Whoever deserts the Führer will be hanged as a traitor." They smear the doors of would-be collaborators with blood-red Wolfsangel runes. They threaten and kill deserters, political unreliables, and army officers, and civil and party officials considering surrender or collaboration. There are also a handful of successful assassinations behind the lines in March and April, including the mayors of Krankenhagen and Kirchlengern. Most notable of all, Himmler personally orders the killing of the mayor of Aachen, Franz Oppenhof. We covered that whole operation, codenamed Carneval, on our day-by-day Instagram for March 25th. To cut a long story short, an assassination team of 2 SS men, a 23-year-old captain in League of German Girls, and a 16-year-old boy from the Hitler Youth parachute out of a captured B-17. After shooting the mayor, they retreat back to Nazi territory. The whole thing does have some effect in as much as that the Allies find it becomes much harder to appoint non-Nazi mayors. Goebbels exploits the assassination for propaganda on his radio werewolf station. But overall, the actions doesn't seriously shake the Allied occupation or inspire the people to rise up. Meanwhile, the werewolf leadership is looking for the exit. Much like Himmler with the SS, Putzmann has offered to turn his werewolves over to the Western Allies for an alliance against Bolshevism. But that proposal is equally unsuccessful. After Hitler's death on April 30th, the 2 men flee north to Reichspräsident Karl Dönitz in Flensburg. Dönitz refuses their offers of service and formally dismisses Himmler on May 6th. He also orders the werewolves to cease operations in Western Germany. After the surrender on May 8th, Putzmann, like Himmler, commits suicide in Western custody within the month. But werewolf activities do continue after the surrender and well into the occupation. Here things get a bit more complicated. As I mentioned earlier, the SS had given little thought to sustaining a nationwide resistance in the face of total occupation of Germany. This becomes a total impossibility with the flight of leadership. For the most part, werewolf teams that do remain active engage in a campaign of harassment, taking potshots at Allied troops, stringing wires across roads, and burning or sabotaging vehicles. In the hills around Stuttgart, Allied soldiers summarily execute a group of guerrillas armed with Panzerfaust. In Nuremberg, a handful of bombings are attributed to a werewolf group led by a Waffen-SS soldier. Every month, a handful of U.S. troops are killed and dozens injured. In East Berlin, the werewolves continue to snipe at Soviet soldiers and blow up or burn Soviet storage facilities. This sort of activity continues past the surrender, but the Allies work quickly to snuff out remaining organized resistance. In the months after the surrender, the Western Allies arrest some 2,000 people in the Ruhr alone. By the summer of 1945, the British have already concluded that the werewolves have been eliminated as any sort of coherent force. These continuing werewolf attacks, which gain a lot of coverage in the Western press, are for the most part individual acts of terrorism, murder, and sabotage perpetrated by former SS men, Hitler Youth, freed POWs, civilians, and the displaced persons left to roam the country. Many of these are motivated by the general resentment of occupation coupled with the food shortages and economic hardship, which really begins to bite with the onset of winter. Such incidents actually increase towards the end of the year and will continue through 46, 47, and even into 1948. And yes, some of these are probably driven by Nazi ideology, and there are still some werewolves among them. But it would be wrong to think of this as an organized campaign or really even resistance in the usual sense of the word. In the Soviet occupation zones of Germany and Austria, the remaining werewolves wait for the anticipated split between the Allies. Once again, this doesn't manifest itself as a widespread organized resistance, but werewolves, Nazi sympathizers, or just angry Germans continue to launch sporadic attacks against the Red Army, NKVD, and Germans collaborating. In ethnic German areas of Poland and Czechoslovakia, they hope that aligning with the West in the coming conflict will return these lands to Germany. In this light, the Soviets view the werewolves as further evidence of a supposed Western Nazi conspiracy against the Soviet Union. In response, the NKVD infiltrates the networks and rounds up over 3,000 suspected resistors by October 1946. This paranoia isn't completely crazy. In the years to come, British and American intelligence will make efforts here and there to utilize former Nazi networks in East Germany and Central Europe. So how should we assess the werewolves? Well, the Western Allies have had to devote some resources to dealing with attacks on supply lines and facilities, and they stiffened the defense of some German towns and cities. But the werewolves were plagued by poor organization, lacked competent leadership, were often poorly trained and motivated, and lacked resources. Even counting a few high-profile assassinations and bombings, they were unable to impact the Allied occupation. Crucially, ideological blindness had prevented the SS from planning post-capitulation activities. Even if they had, the werewolves were unable to inspire a population that on the whole just wanted an end to the fighting. And that is the crucial point. 6 years of war has left Europe broken and war-weary, especially Germany. Nazi terror against its own in the last months of the war has finally diluted the previously strong national resolve to fight on even further. This is where the complete defeat of Nazi Germany reaches a conclusion that might not be palatable, as it has come with massive human suffering and has in part been carried out in disregard of the laws of war and conflict, but cannot be denied. The total destruction of German cities by aerial bombardment, the massive, brutal assault on the Reich by the Red Army in the final months of the war, and the Nazis finally turning into werewolves, preying on their own, or simply evading by suicide or flight, has led to success and victory. Nazism in Germany in 1945 is defeated. Hatred has bred hatred, and those who sowed the wind have reaped the whirlwind. This is the end station of all ideologies based on fear and hatred. Sooner or later, its movement will have consumed itself and die a whinging, whimpering death, while its perpetrators run for the hills. Never forget.